2 minutes, 1 minute actually. So you see they're all playing from the screen. That's because we're going to start the session by showing you a very short excerpt of a very good movie by Nyal Mueenuddin. This is a movie which is called When the Floods Come, which he filmed in Pakistan from the very northern areas where the Indus River is taking its sources, all the way to the sea via the plains of Punjab, the plains of Sindh, a bit of Balochistan, and with sources in Kepi. And the goal of this movie was to show how the Indus is sustaining Pakistan, but also how with climate change and natural disaster it is now putting the lives, but also the livelihoods and even the culture of millions of Pakistanis at risk. So we will start by watching the part of his movie which is taking place in Sindh, and at the end of the session, once you have discussed, you'll be welcome to go and see him and know where you can watch the movie, which is extremely beautiful. And now we're going to sing for just a few minutes, and then we will come back and talk to you.
Last year, after an intense heat wave, this province received 800% of its annual rainfall in a few short weeks. As we progress, the signs of last year's floods become painfully clear.
اللہ خیر رکھ تلا گرمی جو ہے پکو بند نہ ہو جائے نا اساں کے یہ دے تو دماغ رکھنا گرمی ہے.
آپ پچھلے سال کے بارے میں بتا دیں کہ آپ نے کیا دیکھا تھا اور کیا ہوا تھا ادھر.
بڑی تکلیف تھی. یہ جو بارش آئی نا اس میں اتنا مشکل وقت تھا نا وہ تو ہم کس لیے کبھی بھی بھول نہیں سکتے.
اللہ نے بچایا لیکن بچنے کا چانس حقیقت میں نہیں تھا. اتنا سیلاب ہم نے زندگی میں نہیں دیکھا. جو دریائی سیلاب ہے نا وہ تو چلو نکل جاتا ہے, اپنا راستہ خود بناتا ہے. یہ جو اوپر کا تھا ہمیں بالکل مسمار ہو گئے, ہمارے گھر گئے, ہمارے بچے بیمار ہو گئے, بچے فوت ہو گئے, مال مویشی وہ ہمارا مر گیا. وہ بھوک میں مال کیا کھائے. قیامت کا منظر تھا. حقیقت یہ ہے.
خوف ہو رہا تھا. ہم بس بچیں گے, یہ بچے بھی ہمارے بچے گے یا نہیں بچیں گے یہ بھی ہمیں معلوم نہیں تھا. ہم بڑے بڑے ڈرم میں اس یہ چارپائی اس پہ باندھ کے بچوں کو یہاں سے لے گئے ہم روڈ پہ.
آرام سے ایسا نہ ہو کہ یہ چارپائی الٹل جائے, ہمارے بچے مر جائیں. رات کو خواب دیکھتے ہیں تو صبح ہوتے ہیں ہمارے بچے کہہ رہے کدھر گئے. یہی خواب بچوں کا آتا ہے تو ہمارا کہ یہ بچوں ڈوب گئے کدھر گئے, دیکھتے ہیں نہیں گئے ہمارے بچے جو ہے نا وہ سوئے پڑے ہیں. ایسا ہی خوف دل میں ابھی تک تو ہے ہی ہے.
تو آپ نے پچھلے سال ادھر کیا دیکھا تھا, مطلب آپ کے کام کے ذریعہ سے؟
جب لوگوں کے پاس کھانے پینے کے لیے کچھ نہیں ہوگا تو ضرور کچھ نہ کچھ وہ کھانے کے لیے تو کریں گے. صرف سیلاب جو ہے پانی جب واش نہیں ہوتا اس کے بعد جو گزر جاتا ہے تو اس کے کافی اثرات اس ایریا پر مرتب ہوتے ہیں. تو کبھی کرائم کی شکل میں ہوتا ہے, بیماری کی شکل میں ہوتا ہے, بھوک کی شکل میں ہوتا ہے, بے روزگاری کی شکل میں ہوتا ہے. کافی ان کے اثرات ہیں.
لیکن ہم ایسے لا کے سب تنگ آ گئے, اتنا تنگ آ گئے نا خدا کی قسم بولے یہاں سے بھاگ گئے نا. اور ہمارے پاس پیسہ نہیں ہے, جائے تو جائے کہاں. اگر ہمارے پاس پیسہ ہوتا تو 1 منٹ بھی یہاں پہ ہم نہیں کہتے.
زندگی میں آپ کو خوشی کیا چیز دیتا ہے؟
زندگی ہو بس کچھ کو نہ ہوتا.
गरीब पे जो हाल करो खुशी आवा आज गुंडा होने वाले थे जो गुंडो हुआ था शे वही व्यक्ति आने असा गरीब मिस्किन आवा मानी पेट का मिला चाह तो वो यो जिंदगी सायो करो कुछ का भैया वही खाऊं था शायद वही था बार वही नहीं बस इतने पेट पानी था घर में
To survive here, the Pakistani people will have to adapt quickly. A burden forced upon them by the world's most prosperous nations.
एक के साथ बैठा जाता रहा है। मैं तो 5 साल को साथ बैठा तो मैं शादी भी किया था ना, पसंद करके शादी किया था। अभी तक शादी नहीं किया, शादी भी नहीं कर सकता हम।
बहुत अच्छी चीज़ मोहब्बत, मोहब्बत जो बहुत अच्छी चीज़ है, जो इंसान जिसके साथ भी होए, बच्चे हैं, बीबी है, लड़के हैं।
और बच्चे जवान थी गए हूँ तो पकार तो घर सुते रहा कितनी माल भी करे नू घास आ कपे ओ पानी जाते पकड़े चला के घूम जा
एक बे को साथ देना है ना, और कब वक्त आए ना एक बे को मुसलमान बताने साथ दे, जो इंसान है उसको साथ दे, भी उसको बाहर का दो डूबन वाला है कोई भी हमसाया जो मेरे पास गड्डी है या कोई मेरे साथ बच सकते, मैं कोशिश करा उनको वहाँ भीड़ से बाहर बताऊँ दाना जानी निकलता अल्लाह ताला नसीब कर जो न मुख्तार बंदे की कोशिश कर दूँ बचावा।
This new and uncertain environment is the inheritance of Pakistan's children, and their lives won't be easy. But maybe, if they stand with each other, and the world finally stands by them, perhaps then there is hope.
Thank you, and we are now going to start the discussion. These are, of course, images which were taken in 2022, following the very huge floods which devastated Pakistan and other impacts of climate change. And of course, these are images which many of us saw again just even a few weeks ago, when KP, but also Gilbaltistan and Punjab again were affected by another climate disaster and more flooding. So why are we documenting these natural disasters? Does it make sense? How are we documenting them? Was there any change over time? I mean, we remember several decades ago when there was a big tsunami, for instance, in Asia, big earthquakes. A lot of the documentation at the time was showing journalists standing with suffering people in the back and telling you everything which is happening is terrible. Have we come to a point where we tell this disaster differently? What we just saw in the movie was a very good example. People telling their own stories and not not having someone else from outside tell about it, but themselves saying what they went through. So to discuss how do we do this coverage of natural disasters, is it now something that is framed into a bigger story like that of climate change, which unites all of us. I am with a very distinguished panelists. I will start with the lady, Zofine Ibrahim, who is a journalist who has covered for, sorry, I will have to say, more than 3 decades climate disasters. She's based in Karachi, and someone told me that she said something which I find very beautiful and explains why I've been myself in Pakistan for 6 years, is that this is a perfect country to be a journalist. Under every stone you turn, you will find a story. And I have to add a very beautiful one. Next to her is Mikail Mikail Malik. Okay, it's after lunch. Mikail Malik, apologies. He's a journalist and producer at TRT World. He's just arrived from Istanbul to talk to us about his vision of covering natural disasters, which he knows very well, as Mikail is the person behind the show called Just 2 Degrees. This is obviously a reference to global warming and climate change, and this is something he knows very well and that he will explain to us. And last but not least, we have Nyal Mueenuddin with us. He's, as you've just seen, a filmmaker. He got last year a BAFTA in Los Angeles for this very beautiful movie called When the Floods Come, which I encourage you all to watch. And Nyal is currently working on a second movie about glacial melting and their impact on nature and people. So maybe I will start, since we just saw the movie, by asking you, as a filmmaker, what drove you to want to cover like these natural disasters? Is it, and which you continue to do today with this second video?
Hello. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure for me to be here and talk with you. I think what began my desire to cover climate in Pakistan was traveling. Initially, I worked as kind of a wildlife filmmaker with WWF, and I had the opportunity to travel all the way from the north, from the glaciers, down to the mangroves along the Indus River, looking for different, endangered species. And I think in that time I saw the incredible beauty but fragility of this country and realized how everything comes back to the Indus River in this country. And that by focusing on the Indus and its health, that this is kind of the key for Pakistan's sustainable future, thinking about our water resources. And so since then I've been making films and working on understanding what's happening with the Indus River and how that will define our future as Pakistanis.
So we have another person working with images here, Mikail Malik. I wanted to ask you as well, so your job is slightly different. You are a television journalist. Why brought you to the idea of doing a show which is about climate change and natural disasters, and how do you weave the two together?
Thank you so much, everybody. Nice to meet you all. I'm Mikail. I live in Istanbul. First of all, the show I work on wasn't my idea. I joined TRT World 3 years ago as a producer, and I was put on the show just around 2 years ago, actually. And the executive producer is sitting right there filming me. But basically what we do is very different than what Nyal does, because we work in the crazy news cycle, right? And we're uniquely positioned because we have a 26-minute show that focuses exclusively on the climate crisis. And it allows us to kind of go into a long-form explanation to break through the noise, because often when a disaster strikes, the news coverage is all over it. You see headlines, human suffering is reduced to statistics. And what we try to do is to go beyond that and to actually speak to those on the front lines and hear their stories and allow them to explain to the international community what their needs are. Because the climate crisis isn't something that anyone will be immune to. It doesn't care about borders. And actually, Nyal has been a guest on our show. So we actually showcased his film that you guys all just watched. And I think it's a perfect example of how You can move people. I don't know if you guys were feeling a bit like goosebumps toward the end of that, but I was. And the human emotion and the you know, as Pakistani, I'm a Pakistani, it's our people, you know, and when you see such vulnerability and fragility, like Nyal said, it makes you want to act. So that's kind of me.
And we also have with us Zofine. So you are the one here who is a written press journalist. So I wanted you to explain why have you been working like this on natural disaster for all this time? What do you think you can bring today in I would say an era of digital social media?
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I think first of all, this will be 20 years since the earthquake. On October 8th will be the 20th year. So my journey may have begun earlier in writing and writing on environment, on other issues. But I think the 8th October was really, for so many of us, was a terrible experience. We didn't really, not all of us experienced it, but we all know what it did to us. I think writing comes easier to me, but experiences, to not be able to experience what was happening up in the north was even more terrifying. And back then we didn't have social media, we didn't have, I don't think I had a phone even, a cell phone. So I was getting very agitated, and even then I was a freelancer, so I didn't know how to go and help out there. My way of helping was through my words. And I was getting very upset about it, but so we found ways of doing, writing by interviewing remotely if I could, or whatever, we could do in Karachi. So I was writing about that. There was no dearth of writing stories at that time. However, I got an opportunity after 3 months to go and write about anything that I wanted to write after the earthquake had happened. It wasn't easy. It was cold. It was it was raining. Tremors were still happening. But I didn't really, like maybe Mikail or my friend there would experience the visuals. I didn't see all that, which we had been watching over television. By the way, by 2002, television, private television channels had also come out. So, what I'm trying to say is that my way of giving back to that community which had suffered was through my words. And I was trying as best as I could to, tell the world what was happening in my country, how much aid we needed, what was happening to people, how many people had lost their lives and their livelihoods, how many people were coming from, from north to south, and what we could all do. So that was, I think, my way of giving in. But anyway, as a journalist, there's always this dilemma of being there and being your ears and eyes and ears, or just, reporting and a sanitized way of reporting and getting away with it. And the paradox is that you can't always do that. People in the field or the communities are expecting much more from you than you can give back. And so I have been covering, and it's been a difficult, it's not an easy field to go out in the field and report. But I've also found my way of, keeping a little distance and still reporting and being able to make a difference. But I can't have the visuals that these people have, I just have words.
Thank you, Zofine. So I thought about the first question to ask to our panelists. I should maybe introduce myself. I'm Wiebel. I'm the head of communication of the United Nations in Pakistan, and I've covered myself the communication on the disasters in 2022 on the floods in Pakistan. I was on a boat in Jang a few weeks ago to cover the floods which have affected Punjab. And if someone was to ask me, why do you cover like these natural disasters? I've covered also wars in Gaza, etc. The answer is very easy. If you're the United Nations, it's because we want to, be able to mobilize public opinion and put pressure to put an end to, in the case of conflicts, to the conflict. So you put pressure on the parties. Often it doesn't work. For natural disaster, you want to influence the governments to intervene and also to influence the donors to give money to be able to have a response, because of course you need to provide a lot of help to the people, immediate assistance. Anyone who has been displaced by a flood, for instance, needs food, water, and you want to help them recover their lives, so they're going to need help to rebuild schools, rebuild their houses, take care of their fields when they've been destroyed by water. So for the UN, it's the reason why when there's a natural disaster, we want not only to respond but also to cover it. It's for it's to make it known so that we can respond, so that we can mobilize whoever can help. But I have this question for you. Why do you think there is an interest, it's a very naive question, but why is there an interest in covering natural disasters for you in your media or in your job? So maybe we can start with you, Mikail.
Sure. Well, actually, right now I think that the news media is going through a very interesting shift where there's a huge appetite for environmental news, because as the public grows more conscious of the effects of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, there's more demand for information on it. But at the same time, I think media is still so geared towards like the news cycle and sound bites, that a conversation as difficult and as complex as natural disasters, even though I would say more than 70% of the natural disasters that we see happening today there's a climate signal related to it. So maybe unnatural disasters might be a better term. But I think that there's a huge appetite and a huge interest, but finding the right way to have the conversation about such a huge, complicated, scientific discussion requires enormous amounts of resources and finances at the end of the day.
I have to agree that. Sorry. Yeah, it does require finances, but also for a country like Pakistan, I think that there are very few women journalists who will be pursuing this field. It's science as well as going out into the field. Both are difficult. We've not taken science very seriously. We do not understand. It's complicated. Climate change is complicated. It is an evolving science. So you have to be, always, you have to be ready to learn something more, something different, some new terminologies keep coming. However, I would say that for a person like me personally, it is easy compared to a male counterpart. I get away with a lot. I can go out in the field. I can, get into people's homes where my male counterpart may not be able to. I can probe into, I can do interviews with women that men cannot. So in a way, I feel blessed to be in that place where I am. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not as easy as, writing from the desk. And I do that too. I am not always in the field. I can't always afford to go, but when I can, I love to go out and get all dirty. Yeah.
And what about you, Nyal? Why would you do movies about natural disasters like the flood? Do you think there is a public for it?
I think honestly, it's first and foremost a way for me to understand what's happening. It's a way to satisfy my need to understand. I don't know, when I'm in Islamabad or in Lahore, in these kind of circles of privilege, I feel very isolated from the world and from what's really happening across the country. And I think as soon as I step out and go and begin doing these interviews or begin doing these stories, I suddenly remember what the vast majority of the people in this country are experiencing, and that brings me closer to Pakistan, closer to to its people. And then I think the camera, being able to go and ask people intimate human questions about their lives, about their dreams, about their own childhoods and what they would wish for their children. I think it's also cathartic for them. I have found people across the country have been incredibly in need to speak, to express themselves, to say, this is my story, this is what I've been through. Nobody's ever asked me these questions before. Nobody's wanted to hear what I've experienced. And then I think being able to take those interviews and those moments and share them with people who don't have access, you know, to disaster zones, for example. The work then kind of acts as a bridge between people in different parts of the world, and it, you know, I think it helps for all of us to kind of remember our own humanity and what we share as human beings, foundationally, you know, the human experience. And I think coming back to that is an important way of covering natural disaster, because it's not just about millions of people, it's about one person, and that experience is actually something that has a lot of commonalities with, you know, everyone's experience. So I guess for me it's just a way of understanding the world and helping others to understand it too, to understand ourselves as humans and to help people remember their own humanity and the connections between us. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think you made very good points.
I just want to endorse all this, that this is exactly how I feel. It's an extremely humbling experience. Because, you know, I mean, jo bhi kaho, I'm speaking in English, I am eating good food, I come from a class of privilege where I've got good education. And then you go into the field and you see all this, and it's really humbling. It's a lesson for you that not only are you blessed, we are always thankful for that, but what more can you do for those people? So it is extremely humbling.
So I think it's a very good point. I think it's something that we all experience, you know, when you go and meet people and you ask them questions. I remember in 2022 filming a gentleman who was a day laborer who was living in a squalid tent with his wife and children, and who told me, he asked me how long I was staying. It was in Balochistan, and I told him in 2 days I'm going, and I'll be going to Lahore. And he told me, you know, you come here and you film us, but do you really think that people who are sitting in luxury houses in Lahore or the capitals of the world have any interest with what we are living through, and if they will even think about it after seeing it on TV? So I think it's also a very good point to always remember that the people who are involved there also have their point of view. The question I was actually wanted to ask, we all seen, it's more like of a human-made disaster, what's going on in Gaza, but what was very striking, and I think it's a novelty, is how much of this human disaster, this war, has been filmed and documented by the people who are victims of it themselves. So you see a lot of video clips, very often absolutely horrible, showing immense suffering done by the people who are in Gaza themselves. How did you see over the time that you've been working this kind of change for covering natural disaster? We are in a time when everyone now has a phone and can try, if they have access to internet, to put documentation on it online. How have you seen over the past, let's say, 10 years, have you seen any change in the way these natural disasters are documented? And what is, I would say, the space which is given to the people who are victims of it themselves?
Yeah, I think we're living in the, I think we're living in the age of like citizen journalism, where the days of us going on the television to see the latest images has been disrupted by X and TikTok and Instagram. So everyone kind of has a role in, you know, providing all this new images always. But I just wanted to pick up on the point that my co-panelists were also mentioning about, you know, it being a very humbling job. But I also think, and this is something that I thought about when we were recently in Dhaka, doing a story there on this floating village that is adapting to the rising waters due to the extreme rainfall during the monsoon season. We went to this really, really beautiful village, and there are these children who are going to school on these boats that are powered by solar panels. And I was like thinking, okay, now we've come to this village, we're telling their story, but what, we're just gonna leave? And then there's just gonna be one story that we told? And it made me think, like, as journalists, what is our role? Are we meant to just give people voices, or are we supposed to leave them in a better place than when we received them? So I think we need to have a discussion as journalists about ethical considerations, about entering these communities, often who are so vulnerable, who are so easily exploited. And we have to find a mechanism to support these communities so that when we leave, there's a path forward for them and that our visit ended up having a positive impact. So on our team, I'm not trying to show off or anything, I'm trying to just inspire further action, is that we started a fundraiser. We said, you know what, nothing crazy, just a chuff.org. Let's just send it amongst our friends, see how much we can raise, and support these kids. Because they gave us the confidence of telling their story. The least we could do is attempt to provide them something material, tangible, that they can say, this visit benefited us. And I think that's what's missing right now in media, is we have the empathy, we feel things, but what are we going to literally do for these people? So that's kind of where I come to this.
You know, that's the dilemma that I face almost with all stories. Back in 2022, I did a story on the floods, and it was about a woman whose house had been washed away twice. In 2010, and then it took her so many years, about 7 years, she made it and then it got washed away. The story came in a German newspaper. I got a call from the editor saying that somebody wants to pay the entire amount because I'd said that this is how much it will take. The people who I contacted to get to that person, it was an NGO, and I said that, you know, somebody wants to pay the entire amount. She will get a house not in 7 years, but in the next few months. And that NGO said that, you know, we can't have money coming in. How will we, explain this money coming in? How will we get it to the person? There's lots of questions which are going to be asked. So, in the end, I couldn't get the money through to that woman. In fact, there were 2 cases when 2 people from abroad had said that they will help with the entire amount. And in both the cases, I was not able to help, although however much I tried. But I also think that as journalists, it's a very difficult line to cross between activism and doing plain journalism. But with disasters happening so often that it's a conversation that we need to have, but there's a lot of ethics involved with it, whether we should or we shouldn't. We can show the face of the disaster, we can show what's happening to the government, to the organizations that are helping, and then maybe move on to the next, or maybe do a follow-up. Follow-ups are important, which we don't do enough.
So it's a very good point, and I know that whether it's the United Nations or NGOs, often the principle is you cannot give money to only one person. It has to be a collective, but because very often, of course, one story will attract attention. So, but it's certainly even for aid workers always raising a lot of issues, like you want to help people that you connected with. I think we're almost we're starting to reach the end. I have maybe one more question for you. Working with the UN, I heard several times people who are doing fundraising for natural disasters telling me that sometimes it's easy for natural disasters, sometimes it's not. So for instance, several years ago, I remember a UN agency telling me that they had like so much money for the earthquake response in Nepal that they had actually started writing to donors and say, can we use the money for other disasters? Why did people give so much to Nepal? Very simply because many people, especially in Western countries, they go to hike there. So, you know, people will see Nepal, they're like, oh, I want to send them money. So I would finish with this question. Do you think, when you are reporting on natural disasters, that some are easier to convey to the public than others? Do you think some natural disasters will be easier to touch the public and raise their interest in it? I'll give a very recent example. There was massive coverage of the floods in Pakistan 2 years ago, but these floods, for instance, were far less covered internationally this year.
I think, unfortunately, it comes down to you help people who look like you. It's when you see the wildfires in LA and you see how the society was able to mobilize and money came just like that. And I don't want to come up with other comparisons because I don't want to compare suffering. Everyone deserves their fair share of money, but unfortunately, where the money goes and who has the money usually has a nationality attached to it. And some nationalities, unfortunately, don't mean enough than others. Just recently, Afghanistan suffered a terrible earthquake and thousands of people were killed. It maybe was around one news cycle. So, you know, at the end of the day, we need to confront a lot of uncomfortable truths about power, about wealth, and about inequities that are entrenched in our international institutions and within our governments.
So now we're slowly reaching the end of the session. Do any of you have questions they would like to ask? Okay.
Great conversation, thank you. Pakistan is 7th most vulnerable country from climate change. In 2022, we suffered 30 billion loss from floods. This year again, floods and expected losses are around $60 billion. We have huge setups of NDMA and PDMAs, but extent of damage is increasing. We are doing early warning, adaptations, mitigations, but in vain. Can you please share measures Pakistan not doing?
It's not that, I think we need to look at our governance structure also. It's not just disasters happening, it's also how we are handling the previous disasters and what our policies are saying and have we implemented the policies or not. How sincere have we been? However, I would also like to add that, you know, disasters are happening at a much faster pace than we are able to go back and do the remedies. So it's not just that we are vulnerable, but we also have to look at our governance structures and how the money is spent. I think donor fatigue is also there. How much can they keep giving when we know that when they know that we haven't put our house in order. So all those things do count.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Yasmin Qazi, and of course I've been working with Zophine from a long time. So one thing I want to say that in Pakistan, all the disaster, I'm just giving very, local example from earthquake to all the floods. That one thing that we see in the most vulnerable situation, the most vulnerable among them are women and children. And since unfortunately Pakistan ranks so low in the gender index, and we find that, whenever in the disaster, we know, for example, the GBV, the gender-based violence, the domestic violence, pushing young girls into early marriages, the point I brought out in my panel yesterday, is very high. And we feel that, it might look, blessing in disguise, but when you touch with these communities, this is the time to really start working on these issues. And unfortunately, what we see, the PDMA, the NDMA, is where, of course, survival is important. But then what is beyond survival? For example, in earthquake, and then we followed, I've been with the donor organization for 21 years, what we did helped out to create the safest spaces for women in that disaster, in a displaced population, so they can start, connecting with the young, with the women themselves, the young women. And in the latest floods, we have seen the parents are looking how to push their young girls into marriages. So I think there is a disaster after disaster. So, when they get out of the water, they are going to put a large part of the population to another disaster. I feel as a journalist, as very powerful filmmaker, as a very powerful, I do watch TRT very much. I feel that you all can play, and of course Zofin, we keep pushing Zofin, and Zofin keep reaching out to me at anything sexual reproductive health and rights, but the safe spaces for girls, and how do we make sure that sexual reproductive health does not fall into creeps? Because when COVID happened, this was the first thing that went out from NDMA and PDMA, and they had no, kind of empathy or understanding of it is happening. So I mean, it's not a question, but I feel I just need to kind of stress again that please, and then one thing that we have been working, and UN would be knowing that very well, is the resilient health system. We know the disaster will happen, we know what is coming, but we are not changing anything. How can we make a system that still at least continues with some minimum service delivery even during the disaster? So I think these are the points that need to be voiced, and the communities need to be given the voice so they can demand for that.
No, I think it's a very good point, and I think the need to prepare for disasters, which is a very important task, and also, as you said, to remember that even in a disaster, everyone is vulnerable, but you have always people who are even more vulnerable, and in particular the women, the girls, persons with disabilities, elderly, etc. Now, I'm very sorry, we have been told to vacate the room. I'll take a very last question, and then we will continue the conversation outside, please.
My issue with the natural and the human disasters around this area is that, for example, the international media and the blog, I was abroad and I was looking for what is happening in Pakistan during the disaster with the rains were happening. Maybe CNN ran the small little piece. BBC, where were they? Where is the world? This is like.
No, it's a good question. BBC was on the ground, as a day Moshiri with the correspondent was on the ground. I think there are often also issues related to access. But I'm happy that it's always a very good point. I'm afraid we'll have to finish, but please, if you want to come and discuss, we're just here, and we'll be right outside, and we're happy to answer. Many thanks to all of you, Malik, Zofin, and Nyal, and thank you to the organizers of the Indus Conclave. Thank you.